Awesome. Hey, so we are up to part 3, and maybe if we can get those chairs and our panelists up, we got a panel of experts. Now, everyone hates being called an expert, but we got a panel of people coming up. But as he's bringing the chairs up, and I just want to recap on our first couple of God and Money, our series. Our first series, we talked about just the authority of money and how Jesus says we can't serve God and mammon, and in fact there's a spirit behind money. Whenever money walks into the room or turns up, the spirit of mammon is right there. And one of the reasons it's important that we continue to talk about money is you can say you've dealt with the authority of money, but it's one of those things you've got to keep dealing with, eh? Every time money comes back into your world, you have the opportunity to either serve God or serve mammon. And so we want to continue to deal with that. I talked about how Jesus said, talked about money a lot because money is a massive authority or God in people's lives. In fact, sometimes when you're preaching, you can feel the atmosphere just like dry up because everyone's getting tense, which makes me as a preacher want to preach even more. Because what you're doing is you're messing with people's God. Hey, and I don't mind messing with people's gods, and because Jesus is the one true God, and when He's Lord of our life and He's Lord of our finance, then blessing comes into our life. Hey, some people think, why talk about money in the middle of hard financial times? I think this is the best time to be talking about money, because come on, we need God's blessing on everything that we have in our life. Eh? And so we talked about how do we know money has authority. One of the reasons we know that money has authority is because we complain that the church talks about it. I just said that to deal with the complainers. Just try and get rid of 50% of my pastoral workload over there. But that's one of the kind of signs that money has authority. Another one is we act like what we have is ours. I worked hard for it. You worked hard for it with the body and the strength and the wisdom and the opportunity that God gave you. And so everything you have has been entrusted to you by God. Sometimes we can give and think, God, I've given, now I can do what I want with the rest of this. But actually, He's Lord over all our finance, over everything in our life. In fact, He's either Lord of all or not Lord at all. And so we talked about that. We talked about give. If we don't give, that's a sign that money has authority over our life. And then in the second session, we looked at some principles for managing our finance. And how many people know the Bible is the most relevant book in the world? Come on, liberals aren't cutting edge. God is cutting edge. Come on, and He's got wisdom. If liberals are cutting edge, and then why is there so many families and people's lives breaking apart? Why is depression and anxiety on the rise? Come on, God's ways are cutting edge. So we talked about like God's principles work, and come on, I want you to hear me on this, that God's principles work. And He's got principles in every area, for every area of your life. And when you apply those principles, it'll lead to blessing. Come on, how many people want a blessed marriage? Come on, God's principles work. There's some single people there wanting a blessed marriage. We should kind of get you guys to meet each other after the service. But some single ladies and some single guys there. But God's principles work. Never be ashamed of God's principles. They work. They'll set you up in every area of your life. God's principles work in every area, in our emotions, in our relationships, and also in our finances. And my heart and my prayer is that God would turn this area, Hebrews 11 says, by faith, their weaknesses were turned into strengths. And I'm believing that by faith, God can turn things around in your life and bring strength into your life. So anyway, without me continuing to go on, just introducing this, let me invite our panelists. So we've got John Crowther, we've got Clinton, and we've got Anna Wai. You want to come on up and grab a seat. A team of experts. I was going to invite them. I should have tried to set them up and get a husband and wife couple going up here, eh? That would have been great. Notice Darwin sat in on both of them though. So normally sit on both. Just keeping an eye on John. But we're going to have some fun this morning and talk about finance. But before we do, so this is a little bit different to a normal Sunday morning in case you're wondering. We've got a panel here and going to be asking them some questions. And I love being part of a church that talks about real things, eh? And God's got wisdom for your life, and God's put some of this wisdom in these guys. And they're all people that I would choose to ask questions about this area of my life. And you might be, I do realize that this can be a bit of a challenging topic to talk about. And particularly if you're sitting here and maybe you've got massive loads of debt, and you can be sitting here and thinking, these three people look like they're doing all right. But you might be thinking, I don't know, like I feed my kids and I don't have enough money to eat myself, and that's real life for some people, eh? And so I do want to appreciate right from the start, want to say there's probably some challenging things that you might hear, but also in the same sense, I do want to bring up into this environment some people that have fruit in this area of their life. And I think one of the principles in your life, you always want to be listening to and pressing into people that have fruit. Hey, in every area, whether it's parenting, you want to find some people, and this is the beautiful thing about church, is that there's got to be some people in the room that have done that well, that I can learn from. There's got to be people in every area, some amazing people in our church community, eh? And sometimes God will just give you the answer to your prayer directly through Him meeting with you and turning up. But a lot of the time, God's going to answer our prayers through the people that He brings into our life. And it's one thing to humble ourselves before a God who's perfect. It's a whole other thing to humble ourselves before imperfect people to receive from the grace and the gift on their life, eh? And so anyway, can we put our hands together for our panelists here and amazing people? There's no experts in the room, but they're definitely great people and got some great wisdom. And so Clint is an accountant, his background, and that's what he does for a gig, but also does some stuff around property and investing, and just an incredibly generous person. John, he's on eldership as well. John is on eldership, and when people ask him what he does for a living, he often says that he sells cabbages. Doing pretty well. I should give up my gig and sell cabbages too. No, but he manages at T&G. Has been doing that for a number of years, and has a whole bunch of different investments, and definitely a big part of Legacy's just financial strategy. Brought a lot of wisdom to the table there. Has a whole lot of experience, and Anawai's a mediator by day, and but leads our worship team and oversees worship in the church, but an incredibly wise person, and great to have you part of this panel, eh? Awesome, so we're going to crack right into it, and thanks for everyone's questions. Some people have texted in some questions, but my first question is to everybody. Can you just maybe start off with something easy? I'll just ease you in. Won't talk about marriage yet. Ease you into finances, but can you just tell us, how do you manage day-to-day finances? How do you manage your personal day-to-day finances?
Well, this probably won't come as a surprise being an accountant, but I count everything. I literally count everything. So I literally will download we get paid fortnightly. I'll literally download my fortnightly transactions and put it into a spreadsheet. You know I love my spreadsheets. And I count everything, I categorise everything. So I can tell you to the dollar what was spent on food this year, what we've given, what my wife spent on shoes. I try and not look at that bit too much. But I think there's something in counting things. I do think there's something powerful in that, because what you'll find, as I talk to a lot of people, and I used to be in this position myself, is you get to the end of the week or you've been paid and you're like, oh man, where's my money gone? I've got no money left. And you're like, where did it go? And that can cause tensions in marriage sometimes. But if you count everything, at least you have some knowledge in your arm to be like, okay, well maybe we spent too much on that, we could pull that back. And so I just think counting everything, having a budget and tracking that, your spend, is quite a powerful tool.
For Dylan and I, it's got different bank accounts that we allocate money to. So one of the good ones is entertainment, our entertainment account. So we put money aside if we want to go out to a restaurant, cafe, or the movies, or something like that, holiday. Then we know we've got money being put aside every fortnight out of our pay towards that. There's obviously our donations or giving account. There's the bills and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, just allocating different money, different accounts. So no formal budget. Got to get used better at that, Clint. But just different bank accounts, different lots of money. The money's always there.
Yep, budgeting. And I guess what we do is we allocate as well, just like these other guys. And I started off with a spreadsheet, and I know there are people here who like spreadsheets. And so fixed costs is something that we look at, the things that you spend money on every month, like the groceries, like the electricity. You make sure that you've got those allocated, and then we have the separate accounts. I have a separate account for medical even. But one of the best things my mother taught me and I hear her every day when I go shopping. No, I don't go shopping every day. But she always has said to me, those shoes that you can see in that shop, make sure that you don't spend all your money on them. But if you hadn't seen those shoes today, would you have actually needed them? So that's something I always hold in my head.
Awesome. Cool. Done well, eh? First question, can we give them a hand? They're out the gate. I know some of you are thinking, does Clint actually have zero for his home personal finances? Hey, that's what... Anyway.
Thinking about it.
Second question here, maybe if you could answer this one, Clint. I want to give to God's house, but I don't think I can afford my rent or petrol this week. What do I still do to honour God in this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the fact, firstly, that you, obviously, things are a bit tight, but you want to honour God, that's an awesome thing in itself, because I think you can get trapped in the kind of scarcity mentality where things are tough, things are tight, and you're so just kind of on the defence, you're just trying to pay your own bills. You're not even thinking about what can I give to God. And so the fact that you're thinking about what can I give, that's a great indicator of your heart, I think. And also, I think, we serve an abundant God. But sometimes if we don't understand God's abundance or don't believe that for ourselves, we can serve an abundant God but still live in scarcity and live in a scarcity mentality, and we don't want to do that. And so honestly, in this situation, like I said, the fact that you're thinking about what I can give is awesome, and I would just literally ask God, what can I give? Because God doesn't measure based on how much you give. God's measuring stick is on the level of sacrifice. And so you might only have literally $5 and that's all you can afford to give. But who knows, your $5 that week, God may see that as more powerful and more extravagant giving than the guy that gave $500 out of his abundance and excess. And so I just encourage you to just ask God what you can give. And don't underestimate God's supernatural ability. I actually remember being in a situation like this. I was a poor student, and I think I had $20 left to my name, and I had to get through like the next 2 weeks or so. And I remember actually praying to God. I vividly remember this moment and just praying. And I was like, God, I just lift up my $20. Please bless it, multiply it. It needs to get me through 2 weeks. And I really felt God say, give it to me, give it all to me. And I was like, oh, how does that work? My brain is like, okay. But I remember in the next Sunday, I gave it at the church, I gave it in the offering, I gave the $20 just in faith, and actually had an excitement. I was like, okay, God, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and trust you. And then like literally the next week or 2 weeks later, I got an unexpected tax refund of $1,500, and that got me through. And so I just believe, allow for God to move supernaturally in those situations too.
Yeah, great man. It's inspiring. Next question for any two that feel game. Why do you think money is such a big source of conflict in marriage?
Is there conflict in marriage?
No, sorry. We don't know what you're talking about.
Recently, I cut my head, and I was walking past one of the ladies at work, and she asked me, "Oh, how'd that happen?" I said, "Oh, I got into a fight with my wife, and she threw a plate and it hit me in the head." And I said, "Look," I said honestly, I said to her, she wasn't shocked by it at all. I said honestly, I said, "Do you think I'm getting older and that my reflexes are getting slower?" And she just paused and she said, in full respect of me, she said, "No, John, Delwyn's aim is getting better." So let's get back to the topic. Conflict over money in marriage is like, that's a real for us. It's been so real. And we've now done 40 years together in marriage, so...
Come on. Let's go.
That conflict hasn't broken us. Are we still perfect at that? No. Definitely, we talked a little bit about this during the week, and just sort of came to a conclusion that we actually probably came from different value set. So I came from, obviously different family than what she did too. We both had different values. And when those two things came together, what we were going to spend our money on was that's where the conflict happened. So like anything in marriage, not just money, everything in marriage, you've got to work on it. You've got to find a happy ground, settling place. It might not be perfect for you and it might not be perfect for them, but there's a place where you can actually get together and settle and agree on. If you can't get there, you're probably not going to do 40 years. Okay. And so I had a long-term vision on finances. Dylan was a here and now, looking after the kids, getting clothes for them, food and all that sort of stuff. Mine was all, don't worry about that, let's worry about the property game out there. And but yeah, and so those values were different. And that's, I guess, where the conflict came. But keep working on it. You probably got things, we're still not quite right. I'm getting to the end now. I'm getting towards retirement and I'll be relying on Dylan for all the money. But it's like, and so those, that, you know, there's still some stuff we've still got to work through. Pray for us, please pray for us.
I think it's really important to know your spending personalities as a couple. And the sooner you realise what that is, the better the relationship's going to be. I think we talked in the morning session about unity, and it's very important to have unity in your marriage, obviously. But yeah, so just learning how you spend for both of you. It takes some time to actually work out what that is. In the pre-marriage counselling that you might do, John, I don't know, money's probably a topic.
It's compulsory.
Yeah. So that's an ideal place, young people, before you get married, sort that out. Have that conversation. Now, for us, me and Dave, we have set a certain amount that we need to actually consult with each other, pray about, and then we need to be in agreement before we do that spending. So that helps.
That's awesome. It's great. I said in the first service that I was an amazing boyfriend, but then when we got married, I just became a terrible husband overnight, and I think my poor wife was like, what have I done? And definitely in our early years, Kitty's incredibly generous. She's always giving my stuff away. She's still to this day, no. Like, where is that thing? Oh, no, they needed it more. But no, in our early years, I think, and like John said, it's different values. I've always had a real strong, real heart to win lost people, see lost people come into the kingdom. Kitty's heart would be more towards looking after people. Both of those two things complement one another if you can make room for it. One of the things we did early on, just on a real practical note, is we're real used to living on not much. And so we've been in ministry like 20 years, and led some pretty small churches and stuff. And so we've done a lot of just living by faith and have heaps of testimony around that. But in our early years of marriage, we had we still do this, but we've got like different discretionary accounts. So each person has kind of a lot of freedom over that area. That's yours, go for it, this is yours. And really it just stopped me from overreaching, probably, to be honest, and trying to make all the decisions around money. It was a real helpful thing in the early years. I think probably as we've gone on a little bit, I've definitely got a lot more generous. And so where I just actually want to bless my wife and want her to enjoy life and make decisions and be looked after. I remember God convicted me very early on when someone said, oh, bro, do you have $20? And I gave them $20. And then Kitty was like, oh, can I have $20 for this? And I'm like, no, babe, we ain't got $20. And honestly, like, man, I just like, boom, God just convicted me. It's like, man, you can love that person who you're never even probably going to see again. And where's your love for your wife? You know, husbands, love your wives and lay down your life for them, eh? And so just really, like, that's been a massive kind of shift in our marriage. She's probably still nodding on the front row because that nod is an agreement. It's like, yeah, you've still got some work to do. That's what that nod is, in case you're wondering, but awesome. Thanks, baby. Hey, here we go. Next question. Any two? How has God spoken to you about giving, whether regularly or one-off?
I mean, for us, regular giving, our thing is we just give 10%. Like, we don't need God necessarily to get a word from God. That's just a principle we live by. But then over and above that, in terms of giving to different offerings and different things, me and Adrian have a system that if we're in a conference or in a church thing or there's a special event, we'll both usually get a figure of what we feel the Lord's giving us to give. And so quite often that's actually the same, which is really cool. If it's the same, we're like, yeah, definitely that must be the Lord. But if it's not the same, we just go with whoever had the higher figure. So that's kind of how we roll, and it works well.
Yes, similar. So to me, the tithe is just that's what we do. We give to the house. Doesn't take a lot of faith to do that in my instance. It's just like we've put that aside, been doing that for years. As we get the increase comes, and we just pay the tithe. And then there's moments, and I think this is the moment you have, I think we'll all get it sometimes, where it's a big amount or a small amount. You get these revelations from God to give or sow into something in the mission. I remember, I can't remember how many years ago it was, John, but maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, we got into doing the housing. As you all know, we're housing people around the city and providing accommodation. And one of the things that early on getting involved with Legacy, God said to me, well, the way we're going to really get ahead in this church is obviously we need finance to do that, right? And so one of the ways we can do that is actually get more involved in the housing, make it bigger. And not only to provide more homes for people to live in, houses people live in, but to create more finance so we can sow into the kingdom. And so I decided we've actually, to do that, we need to own property. And God revealed this to me, and I thought, okay, Del and I are going to buy a house. And so that's an extra house that Legacy can use, and hopefully one day they can own. And so I remember sitting in a conference, a C3 conference. There was about 800 people there. And I'm actually, while listening to the speaker or during worship, I'm negotiating with the agent the final figure. And texting him back, and we got to us, so couldn't agree on the figure. And in the end, God said, whatever the figures they say, you're going to have to pay it. So I just texted them, okay, whatever you want, we will pay. And so they just came back with this figure. We did it. We didn't put $1 in of our own money, okay? So we just leveraged some equity we had and bought the house. Legacy started to use it. And then obviously the market, I bought at a time when the market was low. Then the market started ramping, just racing away. And so we was able, when Legacy ended up, they could get enough finance, a deposit, we sold that house to Legacy. They paid exactly the same amount as that we'd paid for it, and that was probably about $200,000 under the market. And through that, then they were able to leverage that again and buy another property. So at times, God will actually speak directly into your life and reveal things for you to move on. And I think it's in those moments, we didn't put $1 of our own money into it, all right? So at times you'll be able to do that. We're able to use equity because that'd been 30 years in the making, all right? It's a long story, a long game. But at times God will reveal some stuff to you. And then just on that, I remember talking to my accountant one day. Accountants are great people. And he said, we was talking about family stuff, and he said to me, because I'm a person on fairness, all the siblings have got to be the same, And he said, sometimes some members of the family are got to carry more weight than others. And I reckon that's like it's in the house of God as well. Sometimes there's people in the house that will need to carry more weight at different times to further the kingdom.
Great. Come on, can we put our hands together for that? It's awesome, man. Generosity and wisdom, and come on, using your strength and your gift in that area to help lift others is an amazing testimony. Definitely made a massive impact on Legacy. And hey, next question. This is a question that come in from a few people. Maybe if you want to answer this, Clint. What does the Bible teach about the tithe?
Oh, yep, that's a good question and pretty relevant. It can be quite controversial sometimes in churches, to be fair. So tithe obviously means literally 10%. And you first see tithing mentioned in the Bible with Abraham. He tithed to Melchizedek, which was a priest in the Bible, which was kind of like a type of Jesus in the Old Testament. And then when Moses introduced the law, that when the law came, the law was very prescriptive about how the children of Israel should live. It was very specific about certain aspects of life. And so part of that, and the Ten Commandments is kind of the foundation of that, which you're all familiar with. And part of the law was tithing. And so the Israelites had to tithe literally everything they received, every increase they got, they were to give 10%. And in the New Testament, we don't see tithing mentioned so much. We see it a little bit, but it's never really prescribed in the New Testament. But in the New Testament, it's kind of like almost another level of what the law was. The law talks about it just being a shadow of something greater to come. For example, adultery. The Old Testament said, do not commit adultery. But Jesus said, even if you look at a woman lustfully, you're committing adultery. So it brought it to a new level. So the New Testament talks about giving and offering. And so what I like to think of it is that while I wouldn't prescribe tithing as a law, I do think it's a great principle, and it's probably like the baseline of giving. So for me personally, like we talked about before, I give 10% without even praying, thinking about it, seeking God. That's just a foundational principle of my life. And then giving over and above that is what I seek God on. And so I would say that, I've changed a little bit. I used to say back in the day, you should absolutely tithe no matter what your situation. I wouldn't necessarily say that today, and that's why in Legacy we tend to use the word giving rather than tithing. But I do think tithing is still a great principle, that it was relevant in the Old Testament, and I think it still can apply in the New Testament, but I think it's just there's a heightened level. There's kind of a bigger kind of ask from us under the New Testament that, basically the Bible says that what you sow you will reap. So, and I just believe you can't outgive God. So if you just give God abundantly, just God will give abundantly back, So that would be my kind of position.
Yeah, awesome. It's awesome. Hey, this one for you, John. What would you say to your friends that say church is just all about money and they're just after your money? How would you respond to that?
I'd say probably that if you came along to Legacy 4 weeks ago when we started our series and we've spoken about money every week, you'd probably say that's exactly right. That's all they want is the money. But for those who've been around Legacy a bit longer, you know that we never speak hardly about this subject. In fact, we don't take up an offering every Sunday. It is amazing how God works with the finance of this church. I think people generally will say that about churches because they've either had a bad experience or there's a misconception about what happens to the money. Most churches, let's put it into 95% at least in the world, will use those finances to help people, whether that's people who have nothing or whether it's to help people understand about God or about paying our staff. I always think about money in the church thinking, well, I'm actually sitting on a really comfortable seat, as you guys are. I had a great coffee this morning. There's lights in this house. It's warm. And there's a whole lot of other stuff we know that happens around Legacy, the food and everything. It's like, well, who's paying for that? Well, if you're a partner or a person that calls Legacy their home, then that's our responsibility to pay into that, all right? And then there's the other stuff, the revelation stuff, the stuff where things come out of need, where it's planting another church and we need finances for that, or it's extending the building, or we want to help with more people around their finances and helping people in need. Well, then we're triggered by that as well, aren't we? And I reckon New Zealanders are awesome about rising to needs, and right around whether they're Christians or not. When there's a need out there, generally people in New Zealand will give. Man, they give heaps to people who are in need. And I think there's a huge need in the church. I want to thank Pastor John and Pastor Kiri that you've always talked about the mission. You always talk about the vision, about helping the lost and discipling people and helping the poor. And that's the thing that I'm excited about this church. That's why I give into this church, because if they were talking about money or buying a new seat, then I probably would be going to sleep. But when they talk about those things, it just electrifies me, energizes me, and wants to be more involved, and especially around my finances. So the church isn't about grabbing your money. It's about all of us working together, giving what we can, and then seeing what God will do with that.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Legacy runs weekly Sunday services. We also run a number of ministries helping the poor. We run an addiction program, a significant social housing ministry, and large community meals, helping show the love of Jesus to our city. If you would like to partner with us, just scan the QR code on the screen or visit us online. Have a fantastic day.